Legislators back in session at this time. Senator Ada, can you come forward, please, and take the chair?
Committee's call back to order. Senator Dueñas, Chairman, you're recognized.
Sidus Masi, Vice Speaker, sorry about my error on your title, and thank you for recognizing me. We're going to go straight to it with Mr. Guerrero. Mr. Guerrero, I have a question. I was wanting to verify. Mr. Carlson represented that we are tracking because of the fact that we appropriated an additional excess revenue when we finished the fiscal 25 budget. But my understanding is the way the CRER is coming out is based on adopted levels. Is that correct?
Yes, Senator. All appropriations made are basically based on availability of revenues.
Right, but specifically when we see the excess revenue that's coming out in this current fiscal year in the CRER, that's benchmarked against the adopted levels, right? It doesn't include the supplemental budget?
The excess is determined based on the amount of money revenues collected beyond what is adopted in the Budget Act, yes.
All right. And so the adjustment after that, that goes down in the notes on the bottom and the like is basically takes out whatever was appropriated, so that current tracking of 52 million is based on adopted levels, right?
You're correct, sir.
Okay. So I believe we're not tracking. I believe that your representation is correct, that the way we're generating revenues is based on the adopted level and not because we just appropriated in a supplemental. I don't think that would have added to the total because of the fact that you're basing it on adopted levels.
That's correct.
I want to go now and address this elephant in the room. In the last 2 fiscal years, did OFB appropriate $16.3 million for Simon Sanchez in the last 4 fiscal years?
We didn't appropriate, right?
But we did put an allocate. We didn't do anything for the cloud, but we did put 500,000 allocation for the Simon Sanchez.
Senator, to my recollection, the only appropriation, or actually not appropriation, an allocation we did for the Simon Sanchez is to allocate $500,000 for that project, yes.
But not the 16.3 million.
No.
Mr. Guerrero, you're aware that the public law that was passed, and I believe we're going to have Gita here at some point, basically identified the ceiling with regard to how much we would spend on Simon Sanchez, what their ceiling would be to build the school all in, as well as the appropriated amount estimated for debt service at 16.3, correct?
If you're referring to Public Law 37-22, Senator, yes.
So what I've been told, and I want to confirm this, they have everything they need currently to negotiate and go to market, correct?
The way the law is written, Senator, it allows basically the administration to solicit for financing for the construction, furniture and fixture and equipment, and for the insurance maintenance of the construction of the Simon Sanchez High School, yes, for a total amount of $166,365,000.
Since we prepared the budget together, are you comfortable with the identification that we have made in the miscellaneous provisions for appropriation of $16.3 million for Simon Sanchez?
Senator, right now in the miscellaneous appropriation, there is no appropriation for Simon Sanchez for $16 million in the budget bill.
But it's recognized as an allocation.
Let me check. Let me check on that. Give me 1 second.
Mr. Chair, can we take a recess?
We'll take a 1-minute recess.
Mr. Chair? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can we have you read that portion into the record, Mr. Guerrero?
Yes, Senator, part of the provision of the governor's transfer allows her to make leaseback payments for the Simon Sanchez High School. So that is part of her authority to use as part of the governor's transfer in the bill.
So if the governor says she doesn't like that in the budget and she doesn't want to use her transfer authority to fund it, even though she signed the bill into law that required the appropriation, then are you comfortable that we can go in and just make an appropriation from the legislature?
Based on the current balance of the CER, Senator, I believe there is sufficient funds for her to utilize her transfer authority to cover this particular project, yes.
But if I wanted to, just because I've held the line on excess revenue, it's got a very, very reasonable balance. If we had to, like I put the rules out in an emergency or for critical areas, we would have a funding source with unaudited excess revenue right now, correct?
Based on the available balance of the CER for the general fund, your assumption is correct, sir.
Boy, it sure be nice if we had that audited revenue from 2024. It sure be nice if we were starting an audit on 2025, but I guess that's just when be ready to start an audit and even have an audit of 2025, but I don't see that happening. So, Mr. Guerrero, this issue on tax refunds, isn't it now because of the court order and the like that our estimate that we adopt is an estimate, but the governor, the administration, the executive branch has a court-ordered duty to pay all free and clear or all refunds that have been then cleared and available for payment?
Senator, for what I know regarding the processing of tax refunds, I'm just under the assumption if these are all Class A returns that have been filed and have been completely vetted and completely cleared, then those tax refunds should be paid out in a timely manner. I do know for a fact that there are some tax returns that are being held either for whatever reason for a second review. Maybe they're tapped to be audited. I'm not too sure, but for the most part, and from what the information I gathered, most tax refunds are being processed in a timely manner, which is anywhere from 2 to 3 to a month long.
But we're court ordered to do that, right? We don't have a choice.
I'm again, Senator, if all these tax refunds are cleared and everything is okay, the T's are dotted and I's are dotted and the T's are crossed, then I don't believe why they should not be paid.
Let's go to this. We have never used transfer authority. I surmise, Mr. Guerrero, Director Guerrero, is because we have appropriated so generously. We have given so much appropriation level to the governor that really there's not much of a reason to be in a tight spot, and we continue to accumulate excess revenue. I mean, yeah, of course, in this time, why would you transfer if you don't need it? But I'm sure they have a reserve. Isn't that standard? Maybe 15%, Mr. Guerrero?
My experience, Senator, is, and especially when I used to work at the budget office, we would hold in reserve, the budget office would hold in reserve anywhere from 10, 15% of appropriations. And the only reason why we do that, it's a budgeting tool, a method to make sure or to ensure that that the government collects revenues in a timely manner. Allotment schedules are developed in the beginning of the fiscal year, normally in October, which kind of schedules out the use of those appropriations by these departments and agencies, but it also that's a very important gauge for the Bureau of Budget to monitor, to make sure that the government is collecting the revenues to cover such expenditures as being allotted.
Mr. Guerrero, we've been adopting very generous appropriation authority. Would you say that?
Considering, Senator, over the last 3.5 years, the government has enjoyed excess revenues, I can honestly and probably pretty much say yes.
I think that's an honest yes, too. Going back once again, Mr. Guerrero, once again, because I forgot this one on the Simon Sanchez. Was the governor's EBR, did it contain an appropriation for Simon Sanchez?
I don't believe the EBR contained any appropriation for the construction or for the payment of Simon Sanchez High School. No.
So now we have 3 fiscal years that we have not appropriated for Simon Sanchez, even though we're going to have, but it's here now. The governor doesn't want to use transfer, we'll appropriate the money. But now we have 3 fiscal years, basically, whereby it's been neglected. Even though we had a public law that was signed in July of 2024, just before the 2025 budget. 23, just before the 24 budget. 2 fiscal years. Reiterate for me, there was no appropriation for $16.3 million in either one of those fiscal years, and the EBR, that's 3, that there has been no appropriation for Simon Sanchez for $16.3 million, correct?
To my understanding, Senator, is correct.
We can easily see why there is no need at this point to use transfer authority, because this government is flush with cash in terms of the capability of cash management and appropriation authority. Mr. Guerrero, I know that you joined me when we first came in to this 38th Guam Legislature with a public auditor. And he made a statement to us, make sure you read the audits. And one of the things that jumped out in the 2023 audit was a $33 million appropriation, not even an appropriation, a $33 million just cash balance turned over straight away for the implementation of the insurance, self-insurance. Are you aware of that $33 million? Because he made that proclamation as one of the 2023 audit findings.
To my recollection, Senator, I don't recall ever seeing an appropriation for $33 million. for the
Not
self-insurance.
appropriation, that the governor was able to fund at $33 million the self-insurance program.
If that was a statement made, Senator, then yes, it's a statement made, but as far as appropriation for that, to back up that amount, I do not recall any appropriation for that.
You're right, Mr. Guerrero, because you didn't need an appropriation. That's the kind of power the governor has right now with all of this revenue. She doesn't need an appropriation. She can just, with a stroke of a pen, fund $33 million for the self-insurance program. That's how much revenue there is with our appropriation authority, and that this government has been collecting and banking and all kinds of priorities that exist with the governor because the governor can just do it. It's piles of cash just sitting in the room. Mr. Guerrero, if we do not fund the potential BPT rollback with the areas that we found, which includes the $20 million from adjusted tax refunds, which are still adopting $143 million, very, very reasonable, and the other provisions that we've identified to fund it, what happens to that money?
If we don't, if you're referring, Senator, is that if we don't implement the 0.5% rollback, of course that $41 million would still be part of the budget and would still be available for appropriation. If we roll back the 0.5% like we did, that potential cut in revenues was basically offset by other areas we identified, and still be able to manage to put together a budget to cover the costs of government operations for FY2026.
More party time for our friends on the floor.
I'm just saying, Senator, we were able to bring the budget, the revenue levels in FY26 back up to par, almost close to the EBR level. Yes. And that's taking into consideration the 0.5% rollback we did in the BBT.
Don't give that money back to the businesses, those evil businesses. No, let's have that available for appropriation. Don't be a reverse Robin Hood. That's where we're at. Okay, so Mr. Guerrero, my final question to you. Even with the potential of the 41 million being able to fund the 0.5 tax relief, do you believe this budget right now contains more than enough for the governor to be able to operate the government in fiscal year 2026 with the current adopted levels?
Senator, what I will be sure of is that we took the honest, hardworking time to go through this budget to ensure that all departments and agencies' operational costs were met. There's a lot of things, Senator, that I'll tell you now, not just for this year, but on years back, that we all wanted to appropriate, we all wanted to cover, we all wanted to make sure that we had sufficient funds to cover. In the last 3 or 4 years, we had that opportunity. We were averaging about $149 million in excess revenues every year, which allowed the legislature every single fiscal year to appropriate for things that were not part or not even considered or were not even thought of or didn't even come up when we did the budget 12 months before that. So it gave the legislature the opportunity to address a lot of these issues, at which time 12 months ago we didn't even know existed. So that's one thing. The other thing is we need to also be cognizant is that there's a lot of things that are still pending out there that needs to be fixed. But because of the limited resource we have, we want to make sure that we don't over-obligate ourselves and do it in a very responsible manner, fiscally responsible manner, and not to do that. We don't want to go back to the days in the 1990s where we were in deficit. So we want to stay away from that. So all I'm going to say is that I feel comfortable that whatever is being presented in this budget bill is sufficient enough to cover the basic necessities of all departments and agencies. All these other issues that are coming up that were not even included in the BBR, in the executive budget requests, I believe, honestly, they should have been. So we could have addressed it. But it came in after we received it. And we already have a finite amount of revenues we were anticipating to collect, which did not include the tens of millions of other critical, vital, important issues we had to address. And some of these issues are still issues that have been around for 20 and 30 years. Education, it's never ending. The hospital, it's never ending. It's never enough. But we have a ceiling, we have a budget, we have a checkbook, and it has a balance. We need to stay within that. And I agree. I mean, I'm not going to contest anybody's request here, but I'm just saying we identified a revenue level, we want to work with it. Anything above that revenue level, I am open, as long as you can identify where we're going to get all this money and all these revenues to substantiate and back up these appropriations. Anything over than what I'm recommending, I don't feel comfortable with. I gave a lot of these revenues categories a cushion. But you're asking me to go beyond that comfort zone of mine, and I will not do that. I've always been conservative, which yield over the last 3 or 4 years, $149 million of excess revenues. Is that a black mark on me? Because nobody in this room would ever imagine we would generate that kind of excess revenues. Nobody here. Because if they did, they would have appropriated 100 million more. But we're sitting here together after the fact, in hindsight, saying, oh, you know what? We're going to collect another 149 million next year. Well, right now, the way we're tracking, we're 62% below what we tracked last year. And we got 3 more months to go, folks. We're not going to get close to that. So if we have this thought that we're going to keep on appropriating, last year, Mr. Carlson is correct. The budget came in at 42 million over FY24. But it didn't address a lot of issues. We had to increase that by another 45 million to make it up to $95 million. Never in the history of government of Guam did we ever increase a budget by almost $100 million in 1 year. Never. But the legislature did it. Why? Not because they wanted to do it, because they needed to do it to address a lot of issues that even today I am still faced with. The same old problems. Education, the hospital, you name it. I can give you hundreds of lists of projects that needs to be done. Folks, I want to help you. But if you're asking me to affix my signature and says there's money to back it up, I will never do that. Because nobody in this room can tell me we're going to generate another $149 million this year. So that's why I'm asking. What we're presenting here, I'm on a limb. I'm going out on a limb and saying this is sufficient. We just need to work among ourselves to figure out who gets the bigger piece of the pie. You can only split $1 so many ways. But it's going to come at the end. When we're all done with this budget session, folks, we're going to walk out of this store, we're going to look at each other and say, oh, great job. But in the meantime, to me, a lot of this stuff was wasted. You know why? Because we already know. I don't care about the politics. That's not my job. My job is to present this body a workable budget, which I think I've done over the last 6 years, and I think I've proved it. We didn't end up in 1 year since I've been in this office in a deficit. Every year was excess. From the 40 to the 60 to the 149 million for the last 3 years. And I implored this body to continue that. You don't want to go back to the days where we're scrambling. We're trying to figure out how we do that. We go in the bond market because why? We need to borrow money to cover operations. Never. That is a golden rule you do not do on the bond market. You do not go out and borrow money to cover operations. That's for capital improvement projects, long term, because why? You have a long-term period to pay this back. Operation, you borrow $100 million to cover the deficit. In the next fiscal year, you're going to incur another $50 million. Could be. So that's why I'm just saying, you asked me, Senator, if I'm comfortable with this. I am passionate about what I do. I can support everything I put out. But anything above that, Senator, I won't be able to do it because why? I can't support it. But I'm not going to stop you folks from doing it. Help me put this budget together. I'm ready to do it. Anything out of my comfort zone, well, you know, like everybody else, you're not going to go there. So I'm sorry my answer was too long, sir, but I get passionate sometimes, and I just want everybody to know I'm ready to do whatever needs to do to get this bill done.
No, Mr. Guerrero, you have to clear the record because the bottom line is yes, you're right. When we passed the 2025 budget, we got a scolding letter from the governor. I'll sign this. You didn't fund this. You didn't fund this. You didn't fund this. And this legislature went in and fought all the way up until 2 weeks before the election on a supplemental budget for $50-some million. More for education, more for the hospital. But that supplemental budget is not calculated in terms of the way that the CRER calculates the adopted revenues. So you're right, Mr. Guerrero. We need to tighten the belt and hold the line. My final question is, in the agencies and even other agencies that we have checked, and we'll do this when we go agency by agency, wasn't it correct that almost every agency was lapsing anywhere from 10, 15%, even higher, to include education, at more than $10 million when we heard their budget?
Senator, if you look at the FY24 CER report as of September 30th, it will show that the whole list of expenditures incurred by the administration. Although at the end of the total general fund appropriation with FY24 shows a negative $3.6 million. If you look at the details of the report, the majority, and I would closely, honestly say maybe 95% of the departments and agencies actually lapse in their appropriation. Where the big ticket items were that caused the government to run into shortfall are all the other miscellaneous appropriations that either we added on after the budget or is in part of the budget, but these are items that we normally don't address or is not included every year. They're not annual appropriations, but they're items and concerns that we have to address that fiscal year, which grows the budget every year. But if you think about it, if we were able to keep the agencies at a status quo and only authorize the true organic growth of these agencies, we would nowhere be close to where we are today had we done that many years ago. But I also realize I take into consideration the adjustments like pay raises and other things that we need to be concerned about. That's what drives up basically the fixed costs of government of Guam. Anything that's not fixed is variable. We can fund it 1 year, we don't have to fund it the next year. It's really up to the government. But when it becomes fixed costs, we have no choice. We need to fund it. And when that fixed cost grows, I mean really grows, we have no choice but to fund it. But the bigger picture, Senator, and I'll tell everybody else, does the government have the ability to sustain the growth? If it doesn't have the ability to sustain the growth, then we have no business growing the government. We cannot assume that we're going to get another $149 million and appropriate another $4,900 million only to find out we didn't collect it. So, yes, Senator, to what you're saying, you're correct.
If you were BBMR right now and the governor asked you to transfer money to an agency that was lapsing, would you do that?
This is a hypothetical question, okay? So if I was director of BBMR, I would advise the governor, say, Governor, just to let you know, this particular department has lapses. If you want to transfer into the department to cover particular project, a particular concern, or an outstanding obligation which goes beyond the lapse, then maybe yes. But to tell the governor, we want to transfer, say, $100,000 into an agency that's lapsing $200,000, I would be remiss by not telling her, says, no, we shouldn't be doing that. But again, that's just my opinion.
Then that's why. I don't need a transfer. Most of my agencies are lapsing. Maybe their GG1s aren't going through. Maybe they're not buying their supplies. Maybe they're not buying their materials. But there's plenty cash. Mr. Guerrero, is this a big, ugly budget that you put together?
Well, Senator, first of all, I'm going to assume that those are not your words, but you're quoting somebody else.
Not my words, sir.
But for me personally, I think it's a big. Well, I mean, I think most people know that I'm associated with the Republicans, but it's a big, beautiful piece of work. Okay. How's that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, there's a lot of piece of works, and you're going to see it on the floor. Jesus Masi.
Thank you, Chairman Dueñas. Senator McConnell, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for being with us today. 56 pages of optimism started the governor's 275-page budget that was submitted back in January. But, Mr. Carlson, your letter yesterday, not so much. Improving the planning, programming, and budgeting abilities of the government through proper research and recommendations on all aspects of operations. That is BBMR's role in this process. And can I ask, is the governor aware that you wrote this? Did she read this before you submitted it to the legislature yesterday? Your cursory review, for the record.
Senator, can I make a point?
No, I just asked you, did she in fact review this document?
Cool it? I don't have any grudge with you.
I'm
raise
just
your
asking a
voice.
question.
Thank you.
Mr.
If
Carlson,
you say it in
did
that
the governor
manner,
of Guam
yes.
review this? She read it. Okay.
She was briefed on the notes before I had this transcribed.
That's not what I asked. I asked, did she read this letter?
She has a copy of it.
No, I did. That's okay. She has a copy. That's fair, because when you say cursory, I think that's just not fair to all of us when you come in here and say it's cursory. You've had this budget for just a bit. If your role is year-round to help the line agencies improve their planning, their programming of the things that they need to serve the people of Guam, and the basic budgeting abilities of the government agencies through proper research and recommendations on all aspects of operations, attached to things like, well, this budget, did you advise all the agencies to support the mandate of performing their respective FY2024 audits to be able to help prepare this budget ahead of all of these deliberations? Again, your role improving the planning ability of the executive branch.
When we put the executive budget request together, we look at the requirements, the planning, the initiatives that we can get support to fund from this body, and we put forth a proposal, which that's what the EBR is. It is a proposal for the executive branch. It doesn't include GMH, it doesn't include UOG. It's specific to the executive branch. So yes, we take into account the needs, wants, and we've worked with you guys. And the good chairman here, I gave the body kudos yesterday for working together and providing budgetary resources that have resulted in being able to run the government very efficiently, to make sure that the recruits for the public safety agencies are funded and that they're brought on board. It's a collaborative thing, and we're sitting here because there's politics involved, and as me and Mr. Guerrero would like to say, we'd like to be able to like present something to you. Yeah, I work for the governor. He works for Senator Dueñas, but we talk a lot. So if you're gonna like sit here and try to take pot shots at me, first and foremost, I don't believe I deserve that because I gave this body a lot of accolades yesterday. If it wasn't for the budget that was passed, we wouldn't have performed the way we did. I don't take credit for that personally. I don't believe the governor takes credit for that personally. I think we should all share credit. And let me make a point clear about the chairman's opening remarks. $149 million last fiscal year, I said we took up the slack, and they both concurred that we appropriated $95 million more in 25 than in 24. So we're tracking not at the 24 level because we increased the budget by $95 million. So since we're tracking $50 million more, I would submit that we're still doing very, very well. We're not tracking at the 24 level because the 25 level is $95 million higher.
Okay, let me, I'm just going to cut you off because I get, my colleagues, they have questions too. Again, let me re-ask the question. Have you been an advocate for the agencies of the executive branch to complete their FY2024 audits and to cooperate with the Office of Public Accountability?
I don't get involved with the audit aspect of the government of Guam. That's Mr. Burns.
So that's not a planning, you don't plan that way? You don't help that way?
The way we plan, sir, is prospectively. The audit is something where there's a look back.
Okay, that's fair, but I asked, did you advocate? Were you able to help get them, nudge them? I know the guy next to you has a better answer, but I'm asking because this is not just a one-way street. And so I ask again, Did you help advocate?
I help advocate for what it is that they bring to my attention that they need, whether it's from personal observations, from stuff that has accumulated over the years and has warranted a level of attention, or if it's because of an audit, so like our friends down here at Rev and Tax. There's a lot of things in the audit that basically refer to things that they would like to see improvements on. So yes, we try to implement those things into the budget and the working plan for the different agencies.
Okay, thank you for that. In your letter, you wrote that, quote, reduction of the provision for tax refunds may have been understated. Did you get U.S. Treasury guidance on the child tax credit and additional child tax credit that may have influenced your statement in this document at all?
No, what we did was we took a look at the big, beautiful bill's provisions for the standard deduction increase, as I said yesterday, and we came up with a $8 million additional income tax hit for single and joint filers because of the increased standard deduction.
So what you told us on the record yesterday is that these figures to help plan for the new fiscal year is less significant than it actually is.
Could you repeat that, please?
Again, you told us on the record yesterday about the child tax credit and the additional child tax credits, that on the record you said that these figures to help us plan
Oh, yes, yes.
for the new fiscal year is less significant than it actually is.
I don't necessarily recall that. I think what I said, sir, was that we never got the EITC and the child tax credit until recently. That $90-some million injection until the government's operational requirements has been a very, very welcome thing. So our local portion is here in the provision for tax refunds, and it is like not even a third of the entirety of the funds that we have available to pay tax refunds. That's what I said.
Okay, with respect to BB Mar's comments that the suspension of the rainy day fund could not have come at a worse time, and as a follow-up to my inquiry during the July 3rd, 2025 Special Economic Service meeting, what funding sources were used, and any one of you can answer, were used to cover unpaid obligations in the current FY 2025, including but not limited to $2.9 million in unbudgeted expenses for the next-gen E911 emergency reporting system, $229,834 for software and equipment for DRT's driver's license and ID processing, where the vendor had to file a claim against the government of Guam, and the Guam Homeland Security Office of Civil Defense Disaster Local Area Network, or DLAN.
I'll answer the first one with the
Please.
fire department because I did actually answer that question for you at the SES. The fire department was able to take within their budget. They didn't believe that they had the wherewithal. We did our forensic analysis that we're supposed to be doing. And to be honest with you, I never thought that the 20 recruits every year was ever going to amount in any public safety agency to a reduction in overtime. Well, guess what? It did. So the fire department had the wherewithal this fiscal year to pay the title contract, and we made those payments from their funds. We didn't have to transfer money, and at the same level that is being included in this bill today, which I don't have a problem with for the fire department, there should be the wherewithal for next year to be able to pay for that E911. So again, thank you to the legislature for funding, in this particular case, the fire department's needs to a point to where an unanticipated contractual obligation very near and dear to all of us was able to be handled internally.
Thank you so much. Mr. Byrne, with respect to the self-funded health insurance program for FY2026, how was reinsurance or stop-loss coverage procured? And how exactly did the procurement process help ensure transparency? Confirming the services to be provided and paid for was openly evaluated by the government, and the competitive bidding process was not circumvented. This has to do with the government insurance policy.
Yes, Senator, thank you. The stop-loss insurance was procured by our TPA, who I think invited 3 bids, and having discussed it with us, we determined which was the lowest qualifying bid. Unfortunately, the government cannot obtain stop-loss insurance by itself. The government is not an insurer and therefore cannot take secondary insurance. However, we are trying to work on that and put together a plan whereby that will be available and we will be able to follow normal procurement procedures.
No, and thank you for that. I know as we're preparing, it beats the heck out of being late, so I figure we start now talking about it, because I guess if it's just been done, that this is a better time than any to begin that process, especially for self-insurance. Can you answer anyone, when we think about the rainy day fund balances, any idea of 24, 23, 22? I know that we're talking about rainy day fund. Can anybody on the record give us the last balances for those years, if possible? I want to get them on the record asking about the rainy day fund balance.
Okay, the cash balance today is 56 million, plus or minus. We haven't finished funding fiscal 25 rainy day fund. And when we get to the end of the year, we anticipate, and obviously, there's an appropriation that we will have set aside the 18.5 million that was appropriated.
So help me understand, Mr. Byrne and anyone up here, when we think about the deposits to the rainy day fund, no deposits will be made there if the fund's assets exceed 10% of the average gross operating requirements that are funded by the general fund over the prior 3 fiscal years. And then that's in 5 GCA 22904. That's our guide, right? So I know that in the public hearing on Bill 11 that was held back on June 9th, 2025, the DOA reported the balance of the rainy day fund at approximately 58 million. So you're saying that right now it's, right, as of today, it's 56. we still have some other reconciliations to do going into the new fiscal year.
By the end of the fiscal year, we'll made it up to the appropriated amount. But if I could comment, please, on the...
Please comment. Comment away.
I have section 22904 in front of me, which
Okay.
is the sections which you were referring to.
Okay.
And what it says is no deposits to the rainy fund shall be made if the fund's assets exceed 10% of the average gross operating requirements funded by the general fund over the prior 3 fiscal years. I believe that OFB interpreted that as 3 years prior to fiscal to now. I do not agree with that interpretation. These are deposits, and deposits must take place in the fiscal year of the expenditure. So I think they were in error taking the fiscal 23 expenditures as part of the average. I think they should have followed 23, 24, and 25.
Okay, I only have one more question, Mr. Chair, and I'm just going to say it, but between the needs of the Chief Medical Examiner's Office, the $9 million or so that's owed to the airport, millions more to settle prior year obligations, the debt service that's we're talking about today about Simon Sanchez, the potential impacts of the Trump bill, which is now law HR 1, please share what you can of your decision-making process over the last 6 months to prioritize tens of thousands of taxpayer dollars in pay raises for directors and special assistants and all these staff across the board over addressing the critical needs and critical costs of the government of Guam, particularly at a time when you are all been reporting and anticipating that certain agencies will be receiving less federal funding or losing the resource altogether. And I believe it's an important question based on what I was just hearing going to the end of yesterday. Thank you, Mr. Chair. That's my last question. If anyone would like to answer that, please.
The ability to keep the talent within the government of Guam from being poached is paramount to operating at any level of efficiency. I have had personally 2 people that have gone to waterworks. I've got 3 people. These are trained budget analysts that went down to the port. I had one guy who left off island. Unfortunately, I've had 2 deaths, but it's very difficult for me. And I only have a staff of 16 people running all the mandates that you guys give me, including on the hand if I don't, submit a report on time. We do our level-headed best. I'm very proud of the work that we do. And I believe that adequate compensation is necessary for the retention of talent. I don't look at it as wasteful government spending, because when you have to replace somebody who's spent years in your organization learning and being an asset, then all of a sudden they have to look at what it is that they need for their household and make career decisions that have them looking at other job opportunities. I need to be able to defend keeping them here. I think that goes across the board. I think this body has recognized that with the raises and other stuff that has been put into the budget that allow for teacher increases, and once those decisions are put into place, this body has gone along and funded these agencies to the level that supports the continuation of those raises. So this is not a one-way street, and it can never be a one-way street. If there are upward adjustments in a department's salary because of long overdue and well-deserved increments, and if there's an across-the-board pay raise, and the body then subsequently in the next year provides the funding to continue that, I look at that as a partnership. I don't look at that as somebody strong-arming the legislature into doing something, especially when we have the wherewithal in our very strong economy to pay our people what they're worth. That's how I look at that, sir.
And Senator, if I could add to that, recruitment is expensive. Retention is the better option. It's cheaper. So following what Mr. Carlson says, if we can keep the people that we have, that's a huge step towards not only keeping the government going, and the government going economically, and the government going and able to manage the very big problems, some of which you've heard about a few moments ago, then we would certainly need to make sure that we match market prices.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Masi, Senator Gumatato, and for the record, my friend, you mentioned yesterday that it's have been less cordial. I don't agree. I've communicated very well with you, so. Senator Barnett, you're recognized.
Masi, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to speak and also ask questions of the panel. You know, one of my colleagues in the opening on the bill had made an analogy that this bill is very similar to a husband or a wife giving their significant other the rent money. Here's the rent money. But out of that rent money, you've also got to pay the car payment. You've got to buy groceries. You've got to pay for our health insurance. You got to pay for the car insurance. School just started. So I think it's very interesting that this, they purport that this budget, the shortfall is only $5 million, when the whole reason why we're having these conversations about the impact of these agencies is because they're choosing to prioritize tax discount to these multi-million dollar corporations. And if that wasn't the conversation, we would have that $40 million to address things like Simon Sanchez debt service obligation, to address things like the construction of a new prison, to address things like the potential shortchanging of our people's tax refunds. And so I think that's, for me, the most interesting thing is that we're talking about agencies who are getting status quo budgets or worse, budgets with no anticipation for organic growth. And we're making these arguments that we've got to cut. And the whole reason why we're even entertaining this discussion is because my colleagues have chosen to prioritize, again, this tax cut for the biggest of the biggest corporations, which I don't believe is as urgent as they make it out to be. You know, the entire conversation about the BPT cut was that there are struggling businesses, and I agree there are businesses that are struggling on Guam, but I believe that they're currently enjoying discounted business privilege tax. And I know that we have colleagues in here who are going to proffer amendments that would more sensibly apply the business privilege tax discount. You know, one of my colleagues had talked about planning and research, and this is something that we should definitely have planned for, instead of you know, sticking this thing in the budget and forcing us to deal with a lot of these shortages. So I don't want to start on Simon Sanchez. You know, the author of the bill, I mean, you read the budget forwards, backwards, sideways, you hold it upside down. The simple fact remains is that the students, families, and stakeholders of Simon Sanchez High School are being shorted by this budget bill. And that's just the facts. There's no appropriation. There's no money for Simon Sanchez debt service obligation. And that money wasn't appropriated because we just passed the law last year that set up this whole scheme that moved things forward so that we can finally break ground in the new Simon Sanchez High School. And that's, in my mind, I'm kind of struggling. Why would we pay so much lip service to the stakeholders and the families of Simon Sanchez, and then not only put them on the back of the bus, but put this project even further on the back burner?
The law was passed in 2024, Senator? 2024, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's 2025, that's last year.
2 fiscal years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. But no matter what the chair says, the fact remains there's no money for Simon Sanchez, and that's absolutely the fact. So I don't know who up here can answer it. I've spoken with DOE about the need for this money to move forward on the groundbreaking and everything that we need to do to finally begin the construction of the new Simon Sanchez. So if anybody from the governor's panel can speak to the need for this $16.5 million.
Okay, so thank you for that opportunity. I have been very open with my friend here in at least 2 public hearings. What I said was we have an authorization to be able to go out to the market and get the funding that was approved, as he mentioned, 2 fiscal years ago. And what I've said publicly to this body was that the cost of construction has gone up, and the authorization is still the same. We could use that $16.3 million to mitigate the rising cost of construction. I never said we can't go forward with the authorization. The passage of time, the increase in costs, I would like to mitigate that. I asked if the chairman could include the cash, not the authorization, an appropriation to offset the cost of construction. And also, this is a 2-year deal. We proposed the legislature at the time that the bill was passed that we're going to need 2 years of capitalized interest. In other words, we don't pay full principal and interest until the school is done, but we're borrowing the interest that we have to pay back to the people that we borrowed the money from. That's what capitalized interest is. If we could mitigate that capitalized interest by getting the appropriation, then we have more money for construction. That's what I've been saying. I never said we can't, it's at a standstill, we can't move forward, but the passage of time requires, if the body so desires, to provide the funding to mitigate the rise in construction costs, or to provide funding so that we don't have to pay the capitalized interest with bond money. We would have that money to use, and there again, the result is more money for construction. That's what I've been asking you guys to do. Very nicely, very consistently. I've never said we can't move forward without it. And just to be clear, the Governor's Transfer Authority doesn't have a dollar amount. It just says transfer for Simon Sanchez. So, I mean, is it $1? Is it $2? Is it $16.3 million? There's no specificity in it. So it's nice that if she could, she can, but we don't want to run afoul of you guys. What is it that her limitations are? It's not really spelled out. But we would really like, and the project could benefit with the legislature's inclusion of the $16 million that we've been asking for. And for the final time, don't come back and hit me up that it wasn't in the EBR. I've said it time and time again. The RFP didn't come out until like March or April. The EBR came in January 31st. So I'm not Kreskin. I'm not going to sit here and put a budget bill together ahead of the RFP. That wouldn't be right. So look, it's not there because the RFP never even hit the street. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Well, I don't understand the logic that's being put forth here that, we haven't appropriated it last year, we haven't appropriated this year, so we're just never going to appropriate it. I mean, it's our responsibility as a legislature to appropriate that money and not to take $40 million off the table and then expect the governor to search couch cushions and stack up pennies for a transfer authority to transfer from agencies that are already getting status quo budgets or even status quo negative. It just doesn't seem like there's a lot of cash to move around for that. I wanted to also talk about with Reverend Text and Mr. Carlson, in your testimony, you talked about the reduction in the business privilege tax benefits only the top tier businesses. And I don't know if Ms. Lizama can, because people, when I talk to them, they don't have an idea because of the way that this BPT discount was marketed by all of the players who are supporting it. I don't think people really grasp just what kind of corporations we're talking about who will be receiving this 0.5% discount. And so when I was talking to just some constituents, stakeholders, they were actually very surprised that a lot of the narrative was that we're doing this to help the small businesses, but the fact is this will benefit businesses that are doing very, very well on Guam. And the author of the bill talked about in his opening that this BPT reduction means Guam is open for business. But I think if my colleagues actually look at the numbers will show that we have very, very, very many very, very, very successful businesses here on Guam that are doing very, very, very well. And I think that should be a sign that we are open for business, that you can come here and you could be one of hundreds of businesses, hundreds of corporations that entertain millions and millions of dollars in profits. So it kind of seems to me like the pastures are pretty green here for these corporations. And I think people have a hard time grasping just the range of profit that we're talking about. So people think, and it was even said, I think, in one of the public hearings from one of these senators who support it, they said, oh, there's like 8 or 9 businesses that make above $2 million. So Director Lizama, if you could just really dive into like the range of this and who will benefit.
Sure. And I have to preface this by saying that when we pulled the data, we were pulling it in anticipation of a response to Bill 90-38 on the LEXP, the limited exemptions for certain small businesses. And so you're absolutely right. It's not small numbers. Businesses that are making more than $2 million, and this again is just a snapshot of when we had pulled it, 680 businesses or taxpayers. And so it's not, again, it's not the small numbers that everyone believes it to be. And that is the data that we have here.
Thank you. And I don't know if we could provide that, if you're able to provide that to the senators here, but I'll go ahead and I kind of broke down the numbers for you, Director Lizama. So when you say there are 600 something businesses that make above $2 million, just to provide a further breakdown, there are 204 businesses that make between $5 and $10 million. There are 97 businesses that make upwards of $10 million to $20 million. There are 59 businesses on Guam. That's amazing. I mean, these are numbers to celebrate. That means that it's working. People come here, they do business, and they do very well at it. And that's why I think doing business on Guam, if you look at the profits, it is absolutely a privilege. And then we have 32 businesses, corporations that make upwards of $50 million to $200 million. 32 corporations that make between $50 to $200 million. And then we have the big 6 making upwards of $200 million to $500 million. And so just again, to my dear people of Guam, when we're going to prioritize, and that's what I mean, thank you for the shout out on the reverse Robin Hood, by the way. That's what I'm talking about. We're not talking about the mom and pop Choddy Mart. We're talking about very successful businesses who are currently enjoying, if you do the research, a rate of 5% when you compare that with other places. Not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. And so I think people maybe didn't have this information before and maybe bought into this narrative that we're helping these struggling businesses. But I think most people would agree with me in saying that a corporation who's making $5 million, $10 million, $20 million, $50 million, $100 million, $200, $500 million, maybe they can afford to pay that. And maybe we should prioritize our people's tax refunds. Maybe we should prioritize our public schools with Simon Sanchez and assisting them with the construction. Maybe we should also put away money for the rainy day fund. We would be able to do all these things if we were not prioritizing this tax benefit that I think I've shown is really going to benefit, frankly, corporations that don't need it. There's no urgency. They're creating the urgency because they're so malago to give these businesses a break at the expense of critical public services. Thank you for that, some really good information. I wanted to also touch on the tax refunds. I know I just have a minute left, so. And Stephanie, I understand that you might have more information about more federal tax cuts. So my understanding of this whole tax refund issue, if I could, for the people of Guam, is they're basically saying we've only paid out X amount of tax refunds the last couple of years, so we're going to minus $20 million. But with the Trump tax cuts and everything else happening with the feds, it's kind of looking like we're going to end up paying out more in tax refunds. And that's why I've kind of been saying that this bill jeopardizes the people of Guam's tax refunds, because it takes away money for tax refunds at a time when everybody agrees that we're going to have to pay out more in refund dollars. So if you guys could address that. And then if you could also provide the information on any other impending federal cuts, freezes, reductions in funding that you're aware of.
Yes, Senator, thank you for that. As to additional information that we received yesterday from the Bureau of Statistics and Plans, they informed us that the Coastal Zone Management Program, as well as the GCMP program, will be losing funding as of December. And so those are important parts of the permitting process. They make sure that, you know, everything that's required for zoning and permitting makes it through the process correctly. And so we actually need to make sure we fund that. And my office is providing updated information, which we hope to get to before the end of the day.
Mr. Byrne, could you speak about the tax refunds and the Trump cuts that are going to require us to have more money to pay out refunds?
Yes, Senator, thank you for asking. We don't really know. We can only estimate at this time what the effect of the tax the tax changes are going to be. But as far as personal taxes are concerned, what the federal government did was made permanent some tax cuts that were going to expire. And they also added other incentives to it, you know, such as, I know it'll benefit me, but the higher deduction for elderly people, right? So that kind of calculation can only really be done when we get the tax returns in. But we made an estimate of personal incomes, and we think that it will increase, or rather decrease the revenues or increase the refunds, we're not sure which, by about 8 million. And for corporate returns, it would have an effect of about 10 million.
Thank you for that, Mr. Byrne. I think that further shows that a lot of these corporations are going to be enjoying tax cuts on the federal side. So I'm not sure why we're, like I said, cutting off our hands when it looks like Uncle Sam's going to chop us off at the legs. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity.
Sijus Masi, and as my friend Senator Malafunction likes to enumerate to our people listening, so I want to address that as well. Thank you, Mr. Carlson, for saying Simon Sanchez is ready to go to market. What this $16.3 million is being requested for is to assist with extra CapEx, or in terms of the interest, as well as construction costs, but it's ready to go to market.
Point of information, Mr. Chair. I understand Mr. Carlson's answer, but I think if we ask more stakeholders, we might get different answers. I've heard different things from GDOE. I've heard different things from staffers at the governor's office that don't exactly match up with what Mr. Carlson said. But I think at the end of the day, the Sharks know that you guys didn't want to put money for the new campus in here, and those are the facts.
So we'll bring Gita in for you there, Senator, and they're going to confirm that they're ready to go to market. That's the truth. Senator Terlai, you're recognized.
Thank you. So if they go to market, Mr. Carlson, do we need to pay anything this year?
Thank you for that question. So without an appropriation, we could not mitigate some of those costs that I talked about, mitigating the capitalized interest, therefore making more money available for construction to take into account the passage of time. So we can only use the authorization that we have and what it is that we're going to get net of the authorization. So whoever it is, and I think it might be either DPW or DOE that's going to certify funds available, they can only certify the funds that are available from the borrowing. I've been, again, on the record, asking for some additional relief because of the passage of time. So we're not going to be able to get enough funding to take care of the increase in construction costs that I have been asking the body for. And we certainly can't ink a contract that certifies a promise from the transfer authority because that's not cash.
Sorry, can you just say it again and very simply, is DOE going to have to come up with any money, or GIDA or government of Guam this year for the Simon Sanchez, or only if we want to get it at a reduced price?
What we got authorization for, I believe the net amount for construction is in the $140 million range, but we have to also take out FF&E costs and 1% contribution to the arts. That brings the construction cost down to about $132 million. And that's been the number ever since the authorization was provided. We're trying to see whether or not we can get an increase so that we can get more construction. So if we have to go to the market and we're guided by the authorization and nothing else, we'll do that. It's not desirable, though.
All right, so it's desirable, but you're saying we don't have to pay anything this year on this? What about next year?
We do if we're, let's just say we conclude negotiations, because we're in negotiations, in 30 days, right? So it'll take another 30 to 45 days to get the documents together to be able to go to the market. So, conceivably, we could be in the bond market to get the funding for Simon Sanchez like October. But that's all we can negotiate with. It's the authorization amount that we believe that we'll be able to put into the project fund. So I can't, even though I've been asking, I can't go above what it is that the authorization is without legislative support and an appropriation.
All right, I don't know, it's still not clear to me. Are you saying that if this goes through their negotiations without any additional reference to that in this budget, we don't have to pay anything on that in the fiscal year 2026?
The authorization would allow for us to be able to get a school that is sized at authorization from a few years ago, which is not what I believe we want. That's why we're asking for...
Right, but I'm asking about the payment. When's the payment due?
The payment, we have authorization already for what it is. And again, it's like you're buying a Corolla and you're not buying, a Lexus. Bad analogy, but again, you're going to get less of a campus.
So you're saying we never have to include it in our budget? The Simon Sanchez leaseback payments? We're never going to...
You are going to have to once we actually incur the obligation. Just
Which
like
is
JFK,
when?
After we incur the obligation, just like JFK, you'll see in every budget
Right.
a request.
So I'm asking you, are we incurring the obligation in FY26? That's my question. When are we
27.
mandated to start?
Next year.
27. All right. Thank you. So the Finance Committee Chair suggested that there's extra money not obligated in this budget that will be used for health insurance, could be used for Simon Sanchez and for tax refunds. Is that correct, Mr. Byrne or Mr. Carlson?
I don't see anything.
I didn't hear anything about health insurance.
He said that we've been paying health insurance without making an actual appropriation for it.
I'll clarify that because I've made the statement. I said that the $33 million in the audit from 2023 showed they didn't need an appropriation for that. They had cash to be able to set up the savings account. Now, the negotiated terms of insurance and everything else is part of our budget. So there's no need for them to have any additional revenue to do the health insurance program this year. But they used $33 million of cash to be able to create that savings account.
Right, so is that kind of cash still laying around in somewhere that you guys can use for Simon Sanchez or for increased tax refunds or the health insurance
There are
cost?
two main sources for the health insurance money. One is the amounts that are added on to, the on-costs that are added to the appropriations for individuals who work in the government. So if you look at the appropriation, the breakdown, there's salaries and there's benefits. And included in the benefits are the retirement fund contributions and the health insurance contributions. So the money comes from, part of the money comes from having appropriated those sums of money. The other half, or the other big slice, comes from the retiree contribution, which is separately appropriated. At the end of the year, there either is or isn't a balance left over, we report in the financial statements what that balance is. But it's not like there's millions left over. I mean, the amounts are calculated to be comfortable, but not to generate sums of money for investment.
All right, so did the health insurance costs go up for fiscal year 26 for the government share or not?
We're anticipating, it's actually a very slight reduction of 1.2%.
Okay, so status quo personnel budgets would be okay?
Only in respect of health insurance.
Health insurance, to
there are
cover
other
health
elements
insurance.
that
All right.
need to be covered. Right?
Okay, thank you. And Director Revan-Tax, when we were talking, you were going over the amounts of the businesses that they're making over 10 million, 15 million, over 20 million, over 30 million, 35 million. You calculated all the way up to those over $500 million that we have some businesses. So in your summary, it also shows that the gross income of these businesses over 2 million altogether was 9.761 billion. But they've been exempt. 3 billion of that is exempt. So we're really only a taxable amount of 6 billion, right? Out of 9 billion, we were only taxing 6 billion.
That's correct.
And we get 333 million. These exemptions, where do they come from? The $3 billion in exemptions for businesses over 2 million.
Exemptions, I believe, are listed in section 26203, probably.
Of the
so
code.
it's varying.
You're talking about the
depends on the
tax code,
type.
right? And the code
Yes.
that,
Yes,
in
GCA
laws passed by the legislatures passed, they've given huge exemptions to businesses, even those in the very, very, very high tax brackets.
Correct, from Dave Santos to Lexby to just the exemptions above the line.
Yeah, so that's, again,
deduction.
3 billion in exemption. I just wanted to put that on the record. That's huge to me, that they are also entitled to the exemptions. So we are going to be expecting another list of federal cuts. We didn't receive a list yet, Ms. Flores, so I know you talked about these, but we really want to know the amounts, and I think we didn't get the amounts yesterday for the historic preservation, but if we could get a list and with amounts.
Yes, Senator, so we are verifying with the different agencies the exact amounts.
All right, thank you. And then, Mr. Carlson, if that discussion on Simon Sanchez, if you could put in writing what savings we might accrue in the long term by putting in a little money today, maybe we just need to see that in writing, because even for me, that's hard to understand.
Okay, it won't be savings. It's basically, things cost more. And so we're trying to mitigate the cost. So that's all the ask is. There's no savings.
All right. There's a list of, like tax credits and in the bill, but it doesn't list the Public Law 3827, one for the Medicaid receipts. Should that be also included in there, Mr. Carlson or Mr. Byrd?
That was when there was a cash shortage and we weren't able to pay out Medicaid receipts. A tax credit was offered instead, but that's no longer the case.
No, you're talking about, well, which one are you talking about?
You're asking me about Medicaid?
Yeah, the new law. The Medicaid, businesses accepting Medicaid were given an exemption on the BPT.
Okay, that was, I thought you said, I'm sorry, I was asking a different question.
Yeah. So should that be also added to Chapter 1? Anticipated loss from that BPT, or has that been incorporated in this chapter?
That would be a question for OFB, Senator.
All right, OFB?
When was that passed, ma'am?
June 17, 2025.
Yeah, so again, it wouldn't be in the EBR, but if there is a tax exemption, it more than likely should have been captured in the substitute.
When the bill was being discussed, BBMR had given a figure of 6.6 million. So I'm just checking with OFB, I guess, if that is accounted for in the budget. 6.6 million reduction in BPT from Medicaid discounts.
No, Senator. When I looked into the law wasn't specific as to an amount. It did indicate that it did provide a tax rebate, but there's no amount in the law itself. So when we looked at it, we did not include it in the budget bill.
So are they going to be able to get it? Will the businesses be able to avail of it?
I'm sure it's a law. I'm sure they will be able to.
Okay, so we don't need to account for it.
No, you do. You do.
Yeah.
So the fiscal note basically has a number.
6.6 million.
So if it's not in the budget, honestly, you have to net out, as you said. So if you're not taking that into account, you really can't be providing the benefit. It should be in the budget.
All right, and then I wanted to ask about the special funds. There are some that are short in FY25, and I just want to know how they're treated. Do you use, and there are some that are over what we predicted in special funds. Are you able to use the extra special funds to cover short special funds?
No, Senator, we're not allowed.
All right.
May I also say that in the budget, you guys are thoughtful enough to be able to allow for special fund recipients that get money in excess to be able to use that. So it stays within that special fund.
All right. That's probably what's intended. But there are some funds that we're tracking short or are tracking short for FY25, yet we've increased them for FY26. And I guess I'll get into those details later. But for revenue tax, what is the status of the real property tax revaluation? Because in this bill, it calls for that again, for a reevaluation of real property taxes.
So the revaluation is ongoing and has not yet concluded. And I believe that in that the bill, it's just a provision, but we've already on our side, we've already encumbered the funds needed for the project.
So the contract's already in play?
Correct.
And so we don't need to authorize it again?
Correct.
All right. And can I ask OFB if they've included or accounted for changes in the TEF based on the new values that might be expected? When do you expect the new valuation to be completed?
It was slated for a year after, the signing of the contract. And so while we had hoped that it would come by the fall of this year, the reality is we've encountered some delays. And so I actually don't have, while we do have monthly progress updates, I actually don't have an actual end date for that. Most of the sections have been completed, but there are some that are still being worked on.
When is the 1 year?
The 1 year, I believe, the maximum, I believe it's February. I could be wrong, but we were anticipating, hopefully getting it done
Upcoming
before that.
February?
Before that.
All right.
Correct.
So OFB, that's February, I guess, if they're going to be reevaluated by then. Have we accounted for any of that in here, in the budget or not, in the revenues?
No, Senator, it wasn't.
All right, so TEFF is showing a $6,000 increase, but it's tracking right now below what was anticipated for FY25. How do you account for the 6,000 increase?
Senator, what we do is when we do the projections for all these, we take basically, like I said, an average. We normally use the last 3 years average. And if the average is showing that, there is a percentage increase every year, we take that then into account. So although this year it may be slightly below the average, because some years it's higher, some years it's lower, but when you take the average across, it kind of equates out to a number that we feel satisfied, that we feel okay with going forward. And the amount is nominal compared to what it is today. So we anticipate that next year, like everybody says, it's a robust year, things are going to get better. So we think you'll get back up to at least the average collection.
All right, and then we talked about GMH and the pharmaceutical fund. They get a portion of the BPT, business privilege tax. So are they being remitted the full 6.19% or only what is appropriated to them in FY25?
By law, Senator, 6.19% of the BBT is remitted to the Guam Hospital. Whatever that amount is what is remitted to the hospital.
Regardless of what the appropriation amount says here?
Well, when we talk about appropriation amount, if you look at the set aside in the revenues, that's exactly how much we remit to the hospital. What we give them aside as an appropriation, that normally is maybe on top of the BBT. So whatever we give them in the pharmaceutical fund, we'll give them also in addition as a separate appropriation, not necessarily from the
But what if there are excess revenues? When the excess revenues come in, do they get a portion of that as well?
My understanding, the way we calculate 6.19 is based on the appropriation in the Budget Act. Anything in excess of revenues, historically, we have not been remitting to them.
Mr. Byrne, do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Do you think they're entitled to that percentage from the excess revenues as well?
Well, they certainly do, because I've had that discussion with them. I think we've taken the view, the same as Mr. Guerrero, that what's appropriated is appropriated, and we can't pay out more than that. But we have discussed with them how we pay out the full amount that is appropriated. If we haven't had that problem, but if the problem were reversed, there wouldn't be the money there to pay out even the appropriation.
Right. Yeah, well, I think it was supposed to be like an automatic where they don't have to come back, right? They just get a portion of the BPT, and so that they would have a steady source. If we're doing well, they are going to be benefiting from that, but they haven't been. All right, so Gita's not here. Are we going to be able to question Gita, Mr. Chair, when they come in?
Say again, Senator?
Gita, or let me just ask Mr. Carlson, maybe they know. So during the SCS meeting on July 3rd, Gita represented that they might be refunding the business privilege tax refunding bonds. And he mentioned that the final savings targeted for late July would be 8.8 million or 2.9%, something like that. Is the BPT going to be refinanced in FY26? Is that reflected in this
Excuse me,
budget?
Mr. Chair.
Not 26.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. I would like to yield my time to Senator Terlaria this round.
Sure.
Oh, thank you, Situs Masi. Sorry, not in 26.
Not in 26.
So that discussion was for another year? They made it sound like July this year they were going to do that, no?
Yes.
All right, so that's nothing for us to pay attention to anymore.
No, that's not what I meant.
Oh.
What I meant was we actually did refund the bonds.
Oh, did already? All right, so where did the savings go?
Hasn't gone anywhere yet. We haven't closed. So it's like you buy a house, you get a mortgage, but you don't actually get it till you close. So we're not closing until later this month.
All right, will that be cash available to use?
Potentially, yeah.
How much?
I got to check the figures.
Is it 8.8 million?
No.
Less?
Yeah, that number was a net present value amount.
All right. And, okay, and if you could just clarify, Mr. Byrne, on your discussion on the increases in taxes. So you said you've estimated 10 million in corporate and 8 million in individual that we have not accounted for in the budget, that we only found out because of the bill passing Congress after you submitted your budget. So that 18 million should be placed where, should be accounted for where in the provision for refunds? You're saying we cannot afford to take away 20.8 because we need to account for 18.8?
It's either, it's a reduction in taxes, so it'll either be a increase in the refunds if the taxpayer has paid into their account, or it'll just be a reduction in the amount they pay.
In the withholding? No.
Well, yes, for individuals it's probably withholding, but for corporate it's a separate it's a separate payment.
So, but is that 18 million, not 12 million? Because yesterday you were talking about a 12 million.
That was a different issue.
Oh, that's the rainy day fund.
No, that's the effect of the reduction in the refund calculation. What I was saying was I didn't disagree with the gross amount of the refund calculation, but I did disagree with the offsets to that because we're actually claiming back less from the federal government than was proposed in this budget.
All right, so what do you recommend we change in this budget bill to account for that $12 million difference and the 18 million that you talked about earlier?
You have to consider that that's going to be a reduction, a potential reduction in revenues.
But can you point to a particular line? What literally do we change in the bill to account for those things?
Well, as I say, it's either a reduction in income and corporate taxes,
by how much?
Or by the 18 million, or it's an increase in refunds of 18 million.
Okay, 18, and we don't have to put the 12 anywhere.
No, the 12 is I think is an additional amount.
Yeah, where should that go? I'm trying to.
That should be, so that should be so the provision for refunds should be increased by 12 million just for that.
Okay, so that's 12 just for that.
Yes.
And then 18 as well?
The 18, yeah, that's a judgment call. We've made a judgment as to what the amount is. I don't know that this budget has made any judgment.
12 plus 18 potential, right? And if we don't fund, or we don't set aside that much, what happens with the refunds? Are you still able to pay them? That's kind of what was implied earlier.
Well, the refunds, as you can see, are a large number, but as we get through it, there's going to be a point where the money will run out.
Pardon?
As we get through paying them, because Revenue Tax has done a really good job of, although we have a court mandate, the court mandate actually says you have to pay them no later than 6 months after the tax year end. But actually, we're paying them out much quicker. So as we go through these payments, when we get to the limit here, that's when the payments will have to stop.
They will stop. So you're not allowed to pay over the amount that we've set aside?
No.
That brings us back to years ago when we had to go to court.
You're going to defy a court order?
Is
If you don't have the cash.
there a provision for set aside of tax refunds in the statute already? And if we followed that, would that be more or less than this?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Isn't there a formula for set aside of tax refunds in the statute already?
Yes, but we're way ahead of that because we're making payments.
Okay. And then this is also 12, maybe 18. So we add both of those together. And then in item number 4 in Mr. Carlson's letter, it says 7 million for withholding that we're off by. So you would recommend these changes be made to the bill? That we should account for those? Or otherwise we would not be able to pay tax refunds if they come in
To be
in that
fair, the
amount?
7 million is an offset because that's the reduction that was put into this budget.
Right.
But
So we need to restore it?
Yeah, and I don't know that because I don't know how it was derived, I don't know that it came from either of the two issues that you're discussing.
Okay. Maybe Mr. OFB, Steve, can you explain the 7 million, why you reduced withholding by 7 million? We're tracking withholding we're tracking higher than what was predicted last year.
Again, Senator, utilizing various methods to determine these revenue levels, looking at the trend for the withholding, and granted for the last 3 years we've been enjoying a surplus, and one of the categories was with the withholding. But also notably is that the collection of the withholding at the year end in FY24 amounted to about $35 million. What the projection is for this year by the end of September is $22 million. So that represents a 36% decrease in withholding category alone. So taking that into consideration and taking everything, the other two categories, which represents the whole entire income tax, which also saw a decrease in individual and also a decrease in corporation, we took into account that there is going to be a decrease in collections starting next year. Although we still surplus, I think we'll still be over the projected amount, but nothing close to the way we were tracking for the last 3 years. So taking that 36% decrease in this fiscal year alone, just, again, my conservative nature says, $7 million out of $365 million, I think that's reasonable to say that it's my little cushion. And that's just me. And like I said, if we do collect it, and I hope we do, there'll be money available. But if we don't collect it, I'm trying to avoid that. So I just don't want to over-project what I think right now that we have the ability to control. But again, if we are fortunate enough by the end of the fiscal year to collect more, then be so. But we're talking about $7 million out of a $1.3 billion budget. And it's the only category, may I say, it's the only category that we have a difference in. All the other categories I'm okay with.
Well, I'm sure you know why I'm asking, because 7 million is a lot of money when you look at the list that we were also given of things that are not covered. 6.7 million less for GMH. That's even just from the FY25 budget. Not even, I think this doesn't incorporate the supplemental 20 million that we gave them, right? That would bring them $15 million less. So 7 million is a lot for us when we're looking for nickels and dimes here to make sure that GMH, for example, gets enough money. They're telling us that we are underfunding retiree medical, dental, and life by 2 million. That 7 million can come in handy for that. Supplemental annuity benefits by 1.5 million. Residential treatment fund, 947,000. DOC, completely 5 million. So that's 7 million, very, very handy if we can find it and use it, in addition to some of these other things that we're talking about.
If I may
if
say,
I can ask, this list on page 6 from BBMR, are these things funded in the budget, Mr. Guerrero?
Pardon? I'm sorry?
Are they funded in the budget? They total about $21 million.
Senator, if you look at the list that we're referring to, you're referring to the EBR. The budget was predicated on the FY25 revenue levels. That is the base how we formulated the budget, not the EBR. Mr. Carlson
No,
is
I'm just
correct.
asking if these expenses were included in the budget. They're saying they're not. That the list I just read, I didn't even finish, the public health, Guam Behavioral Health, DISIT, Department of Administration, DOC, GMH contract, they said in their letter, these are not funded in this budget that we are looking at and trying to pass. So I'm asking you, is that correct, that these are not in the budget?
These particular ones that you're listing here, they're not in the budget simply because it's in the EBR. We did not use the EBR when we formulated the budget. So the answer to your question, yes, it is not there. However, there are some here on the list that we can go by one, and I can tell you why it's not in the budget. For example, the DOC modernization. My understanding for the last 3 years, we've appropriated close to $15 million for this project. This project has never gotten off the ground. I understand there was a contract in place this year. That contract was canceled. So there's $15 million just sitting there. I was not about to appropriate another $5 million for this project.
So you believe that cash is still there?
Pardon?
You believe the cash is still available to them, the 15 million?
It's appropriated in the last 3-year budgets. Well, 2-year budgets and one through the modernization law that was separate and apart.
And so without any continuing language, that's available to them, 15 million?
Yes. I mean, I would say it was appropriated. Whether or not the money, cash is there, I don't know.
Okay.
But authority-wise, it is there.
What about the...
All the others here, Senator, we took into account into the current budget. I'm just like, it baffles me how these in the millions can be generating in 1 year as a need that they never had the year before. And a lot of these are operational costs. How do you grow a budget in the millions in 1 year? Granted, they may be important, but and like I stated in my opening thing today, we need to stay within the confines of what we have as resources. There is a list. I have a list here that are not part of this. That's not part of this list, in the millions. To me, yes, they're important. They're vital. They're critical. But I also know that we can only appropriate so much with what we have. So you're right. We didn't fund GMH to what we funded them this year because of the supplemental. And I need to go onto the record and say, when the legislature passes laws as supplemental to these departments, they're thinking that these supplementals are part of their operational costs. And that's what's growing the budgets in the millions. So are we able to substantiate this thing going forward? One department went from 12 million to 18 million in 1 year because of the supplemental. Is it important? That's not for me to decide. But if we're talking about levels, what was their FY25 levels? 18 million.
I think what we're talking about are services. So whether
are
they
services.
grew or they didn't grow, are we going to cut the services that GMH providing, or behavioral health, or public health, or
Senator,
DLC to its patients, to, you know, the residential treatment? So it's not a debate. I'm just showing that there are significant uses for $7 million. And if I could ask another question, there's a part in this bill, Chapter 11, Section 10, it says it's an authorization to use FY23 audited excess revenues in about 15 million. Mr. Byrne, does this money exist? 15 million FY23 audited excess revenues. Is this going to be enough to give GMH an additional $5 million?
Yes, Senator, it does.
All that money exists in the audited revenues?
It exists in the wisdom of appropriating what is a prior year surplus may be questioned, but the money is there. I mean, the whole purpose of a surplus is to build up a strong balance sheet. And if you keep on appropriating out of a fund balance, that's not going to happen. But it is there. You know, the raw question is, yes, it's there.
So that accounts for the money we gave for the energy credits after that audit was done?
Most of the energy credits were in fiscal 24, not 23. But yes.
Yeah, but one of them used this money.
Yeah.
So you've done your accounting, and
Yes.
15 million is available in excess revenues?
Not excess revenues, it's a fund balance.
Well, it says audited excess revenues.
You know, I think they meant the fund balance, yeah, the unassigned fund balance.
All right, because, all right, when we discussed this before, didn't you say that there's only a much less amount available?
In the fund, yes, in the fund balance. But that is, you can look at the audit and you can see what makes up the fund balance, and there's a restricted amount, there's a committed amount, and there's an unassigned amount. And
How much?
29 million.
So that's available for appropriation by us?
That's available, but I would advise against it.
Why? If it's cash?
Because the whole idea of running a surplus is to build a strong balance sheet, and you would never make a surplus if you just used all the money that was available.
All right, well, you're telling us that we are shorting GMH, DOC, public health, behavioral health, DICIT, in amounts that could easily be covered in that excess fund balance, but that we should not use it?
That's not what I would recommend to use. We've been talking about revenues. Current year's revenues should be used for current year's expenditures.
Right, but they're cutting the revenue, so we're looking for other sources to pay for these things. All right, I'm not sure I'm following that, but all right, so can you just account for these special funds that have been increased in the budget before us, the supplemental bill, or the substituted bill? The ones that are tracking below what was predicted for FY25 are increased in this budget. Do you think that that's sound, Mr. Byrne?
Well, the ones that are tracking below, they're tracking below because the revenues are tracking below.
Right.
Mr. Guerra explained that the way he arrived at revenues was based on an average.
Right, that's his procedure.
Right.
What do you think?
I guess my approach to it would be to weight the average towards the more recent years, because that's the better trend. I don't, he was talking about the TEF, which is basically a property tax type special fund. I don't know what change may or may not have taken place to suggest that there's going to be an increase in that particular revenue. What I would recommend, obviously, if a special revenue fund is not achieving its appropriate revenue, that you reduce the expenditure or transfer the expenditure to another source.
All right, let's talk about the Tourist Attraction Fund. That is, they're appropriating, it looks like $2 million less than last year, and the Tourist Attraction Fund is tracking in FY25 less than what was anticipated. So
Yes.
you think we're going to get even less?
Well, again, that's their budget, but I wouldn't disagree that the trend is not favorable.
All right, Mr. Guerrero, did this Tourist Attraction Fund decrease estimate from FY25? Is that taking into account their recovery plan? So even with their recovery plan, they're not going to make even what they've made this year?
The amount reflected in the budget bill, Senator, does reflect those conditions that happens.
Thank you. Can you talk about the, on page 13 of the bill, there's a provision that says funds in excess of adopted revenue levels for this certain section are appropriated to DPW for flood mitigation measures and the improvement of roadways, highways, roads, or streets. Can you just tell us how that worked this in FY25? Was there any money there in excess? Did we get additional streets improved, or what happened with that?
Ma'am, I don't believe we acted on that provision. There's another provision that basically says any excess revenues require the legislature's approval. So we're kind of like, okay, so we didn't do anything. So,
You did not?
yeah, when you see the $50 million in excess revenues, and then we net out the shortfalls in special fund, and I think we're at close to $30 million in excess, we haven't funded any of those activities.
Well, this is is this a special fund then? And so were they able to use it? You're saying no?
No.
So no additional roads or flood mitigation? All right. Okay, and then, so what do you propose that we do to cover the shortfalls that you're predicting, Mr. Carlson? Do you believe these are critical areas in your list? That's the difference, I guess, that we're having with OFB, is whether these are critical or not, or should be funded in this year or not. This Medicaid one is very concerning because it says if we don't pay the match, we don't get the additional $14 million from Medicaid.
Yes. So I would strongly advise that number 7, which is restoring the $1.8 million, and the rest of the local match requirements that are there, totaling $3.3 million, because as you said, we don't get the benefit of the full federal match if we don't have the local match to support it. And we have 4 different programs that are there listed that would be adversely affected if the local match was not restored. So number 7, we really would encourage the legislature to restore that funding. Mr. Guerrero is correct. We did look at the EBR to come up with the responses for number 6, and you know, he's using the FY25 budget, so it's a different comparative, but I believe that you're still going to get the same result for DOC. It's still going to be 0 no matter which one you compare it against. So a lot of these issues here, when you compare it against the 25 budget, Or if you compare it against the EBR, I believe there isn't anything here that's going to come off the list. And I don't think there's anything here that is essentially non-critical. I think they're all critical.
All right, well, talk to me about the transfer authority. What is wrong with the governor using transfer authority to pay for residential treatment, behavioral health treatment, for drug treatment? We're talking about drug crisis. What's wrong with the governor using transfer authority for GMH and all of these DSID, all of these things that are shorted in the budget? What would be the impact of using the transfer authority? Does that come out of another agency, or she's got that money sitting around in other places that would that be able to be used? For example, excess revenues can't be used transfer authority. No, we're transferring from one appropriation to another.
Correct.
So how does that affect? Who does that affect?
Well, as we mentioned before, it's only this time of the year when we can actually make a good assessment of whether somebody is got lapses and the rest of the fiscal year their obligations, their requirements will be funded, and we could identify, okay, you're going to lapse and we can pull money from you to help here. We're in August right now, and August, September is the time that we normally do that, or actually the last time we did it was in fiscal 21. We actually waited till the very end of the fiscal year to, make sure that, people did indeed lapse and all their obligations were in fact covered. Agencies receive utility bills and they're supposed to forward it to Mr. Byrne for payment. Sometimes they're slow in doing that, and then all of a sudden we realize that, GPA or GWA hasn't been paid. Well, it's a function of ensuring that the billing gets down to DOA for payment. So we have to make sure all those things were done before we can determine whether or not there was in fact a lapse. If their pay periods straddle the fiscal year, we need to ascertain what it was that was applicable to the current fiscal year and then the ensuing fiscal year. It's a little bit of an endeavor to see what it is that we need to do. But again, we haven't done it since fiscal 21, and that's because of the collaboration between what you guys have passed and what it is that we are utilizing for operations. So it's been a very good relationship, and what we're saying here, ma'am, it doesn't, we're not anticipating any shortfalls under number 6 in 25. We're saying that from the budget request that Governor submitted, that there are shortfalls in these areas. That's what we're saying. We're not saying it's a problem here in 25. We're saying that in 26, for example, the DOC GMH consolidated agreement is $550,000 less than the EBR request. So it's prospective, not current.
Yeah. So currently, we were able to fund the increase in behavioral health services, for the increase in LADI treatment services for children mandated by court to be in residential treatment homes. We were able to cover that increase in children, but this budget doesn't allow it. And I'm asking, is that 50% transfer authority going to be used to cover that? Because according to the bill, it says the 50% transfer authority can be used only for, I think, 3 items. None of those are on this list, maybe only GMH. I can't remember now. But that transfer authority language? Yeah, and you're saying you're not going to use transfer authority until you find lapses?
That's the only way to do it.
So, for sure, as written, none of these will be covered, and even the 3 items mentioned under the transfer authority provision are not going to be covered till the end of the year?
They potentially could not be covered until we ascertained that there were sufficient funds within the executive branch So we're taking the executive branch, and if you go back to OFB's presentation where they show you who the reserve agencies are, we can't pull money from them. We can't pull money to be able to use as a pool to fund anything under the governor's transfer authority. So you're talking about the line agencies lapsing to be able to fund these other activities. So because we're prohibited from pulling money from DOE, from the judiciary, from the legislature, you know, any number of reserve agencies listed.
Right, and what is the bill asking you to use your transfer authority for?
First and foremost, it allows the governor to use her transfer authority within the executive branch to cover executive branch shortfalls. Then there's another provision that says, and you can also use it for GMH, Simon Sanchez, and was it GVB? Whatever the third one was. So it's increasing what she could normally do, because normally she can't do the autonomous agencies. It's normally helping the executive branch.
Yeah, so do you believe you're going to have that much in lapses to cover Simon Sanchez? Or GMH? Or
it's a
behavioral health?
It's a very, very tall order.
Tall order?
Yeah.
Mr. Byrne?
Yeah, it's a tall order.
I don't know what tall order means. Mr. Guerrero, do you believe they're going to have that much in lapses to cover those amounts that are needed, that are not covered by this bill? Or are you just saying cut the services, never mind?
Senator, having come from the Bureau of Budget, I understand Mr. Carlson's explanation about when you can utilize the governor's transfer, and he wants to ensure that when that time comes, he wants to really be definite that there are monies available to transfer aside from what was appropriated for the original intent. But I'm also of the opinion that, you know, if you're already lapsing so much, $100 million by April of the year, of the fiscal year, and there's a need to transfer $5 million, I mean, I would feel safe to say that maybe that transfer would be justifiable and be reasonable to transfer. But then again, I'm not in that predicament. I'm not in that chair. But that would be my own take on it. But he's absolutely right. We don't normally initiate transfers until two things. One, at the end of the fiscal year, when we determine what departments are short, we do the transfer to cover it. The other thing is that during the course of the year, you can monitor them and see how their tracking is. And if they're overspending, we can cut it off at the pass and say, hey, cut back on your spending. We can do that. There's a couple of ways you can do it. But at the end of the day, and to answer your question, can we do it? Yes, timing is important. Yes, amount is important because it all plays into it. But for me, if you're asking me, if I'm generating excess amount of money, revenues, and you're asking me to move 5% of it.
But they're not allowed to move excess. They're only allowed to move what we've appropriated.
Yes, well, whatever is appropriated, they're authorized to use if it's not restricted by law. Anything that's not restricted by law, it's available to them for them as part of the other transfer.
The question is, do you believe there's enough in lapses? They believe they can only use lapses. Is there enough lapses to cover this list in item 6 at 21 million short in these items and the 3 items that you put for transfer authority for GMH, Simon Sanchez, and maybe tax refunds?
I would like to hope, Senator, that when the time comes and whatever lapses are available, they will be able to use it and transfer it.
Do you know how many lapses are available?
As of today?
Yeah.
I can only give you what's in the CER report as of June, but then again, we got 3 more months. There are outstanding obligations, and there could be things that come up within the next 3 months. I don't know, but I can give you a balance of what it is. But again, it's just a running balance. It's just a snapshot in time that can change tomorrow.
Right. And so how are we going to ensure GMH that you're going to get enough money at the end of the term if we're dealing with this moving figure of lapses or something like that?
As we do every year, Senator, we just do our best and wait and see what happens.
So GMH's budget is below what they requested. It's below what the governor requested, and it's that's by 6.7 million, and it's below, I think, by 15 million what was given to them in FY25. But What do you think, Mr. Byrne, is the outcome for GMH from this bill, if passed as it is? Or is it okay that we're not going to fund them higher? Are you going to be able to make it up with transfer authorities and other kinds of things, whatever's in here?
Excuse me, but that remains to be seen. But, GMH appears to be, I guess, struggling even now. So if you reduce their revenues, unless they can increase their own revenue stream, the situation is going to improve.
Do you believe it's feasible for them to increase their revenue stream enough in the fiscal year to account for the unpaid vendors that exist today?
I think it will take time for them.
It's not going to be done in 1 year, right? If they were relying only on the revenue, that's why we have increased their budget, not because we wanted to give them more money, but because they were owing vendors. Vendors were not supplying the hospital. Patients were suffering without supplies. Nurses without supplies. That's really the bottom line, whether, we like to give them more money or we don't. It's like, you want to see patients suffer because we couldn't give them that money, but is there any difference?
No one wants to see patients suffer.
No, I hope not.
And we certainly want to provide sufficient funds to GMH to run a public hospital.
Right, so is the bill giving them enough?
Well, according to this, no.
Is there any difference between an unassigned fund balance and excess revenues?
Yes, I'm glad you asked that question because I could see that there was some confusion there. Excess revenues only exist during a year. So for fiscal 25, where we are now, it may or may not have excess revenues. At the end of the year, you close off your revenues and you close off your expenditures, and that's what generates the fund balance.
All right, thank you. Again, I'm just frustrated that we see the shortfalls already. We're not getting sufficient answers that these are likely to be covered. It sounds unlikely to be covered by the so-called transfer authority. And I'm very concerned about services being cut for these very, very critical items. If we think drugs are a problem without residential treatment, they're going to become worse. Without treatment for children, everything becomes worse. So without supplies for the hospital, we're just looking at another, I don't think they've even got out of their first emergency.
Yeah. So, Senators, we are going to work until 10 tonight. So we will come back at 2:30, and then we'll take a dinner break at 6, and then resume again. We will work until 10 o'clock tonight. We're in recess until 2:30.